Welcome, everybody. Howdy, howdy.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey, Tomas, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you.
Hey, so as we're getting everything set up here, Bob, are we recording?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. Any questions starting out here?
I got one.
Go ahead.
So we're in the process of raising our prices right now. What's your guys' like general phone script when someone calls and asks your pricing?
Well, let me give you kind of a long answer to that. Is, it's certainly not unusual for somebody who calls to ask how much lessons are. But the reality is usually when they ask that, that's not really what's, on their mind. What's on their mind is they don't know anything to ask. And so it's the only thing they can think of to ask, right? If I don't know anything about martial arts training, what am I going to ask? When do you teach? When do the next class start? How much are your lessons? That's kind of the line of what I know. And what happens is, maybe say it a different way, is most of the time what you're not getting, and this is what we have a tendency to think, what they're usually not doing is calling 5 schools, price shopping, and going to the cheapest one. Right? That's very unusual. But what is normal is, our neighbor takes classes from you and they told us to give you a call to do lessons, or they saw some ad, or they went to your website and so forth. And so here's the rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is first time they ask, you just ignore what they said. Okay. So the conversation starts, I answer the phone and they say, hey, how much are your martial arts lessons or your BJJ lessons or whatever they say? And I say, oh, is this for yourself or for a child? Who are the lessons for? And they say, oh, it's for my daughter. Oh, okay, great. How old is your daughter? My daughter's 7. Well, fantastic. What got you or got her interested in calling us? Oh, well, our friend, you're right. I'm digging for how did you find out about us and why did you call us? Oh, well, our neighbor goes there, and then I got this thing in the mail from you, and I figured it was finally time to start because she has some time to do it. Oh, fantastic. Well, like the coupon you got in the mail, or like the website said, or like whatever, is what we like to do is start everybody with a couple free weeks of lessons. Gives you a chance to come in and see the instructor, see the facilities, meet the instructor, learn a little bit more about the system. We have a time that we could do that tonight or tomorrow night. Which one of those would be better for your schedule? And so notice I ignored it, and then I just went on into the script, right? Now sometimes it comes back, and I get to, we start with 2 free lessons. There's, no cost obligation. Would tonight or tomorrow night be better? And then sometimes it comes back to, well, before we do that, can you just give me an idea of how much this costs? Right? And I'll say, well, as I was explaining, that introductory program is free, no cost, no obligation. At that point, it'll give us a chance to see what type of program would work best for Susie, and then, be on target from there. Oh, okay. Right. And then sometimes, I get, yet again, I don't want to get her all excited about this, that there's just no way we can afford this. And so now what I'm going to do, and again, none of this looks like I'm being evasive, right? And I'm not, I'm not stonewalling. I'm not ever saying we don't give out price on the phone, any of that kind of stupid stuff. What I'll do at that point is, well, like I said, we like to start them with a couple of free classes. There's some options and different ways of structuring things and so forth. But in general, so, I'm going to, as an aside, find a range, and I'll explain what range I would use. But in general, it's going to average from 247 to 297 a month, or from 297 to 347 a month, or from 347 to 397 a month. And the low end of the range, not that I explained this, the low end of the range is if you prepaid for a year, took off the cash discount, divide by 12, that's the low end. And then the high end is what our normal monthly tuition is anyway, right? So what I don't want to do, and I'll see staff do this. Oh, it could be 100 to 400 a month. No. I'm never going to give them a lower end number that I can't do. And I'm going to give them the high end number that is what our normal new student tuition would be monthly, right? So the rule is ignore introductory program and then range. Does that help? Which, by the way, none of this has anything to do with you raising your prices. Right. What you think, see, if somebody tells me a price for something I haven't ever seen, haven't ever done, don't know anything about them, don't know anything about, in this case, the school, and don't have any reference for value, is you could say it's $50 and it sounds high, or you could say it's $600 and it sounds low, right? So the what you don't want to do is think that if you're changing the tuition from what you used to do, that in some way has anything to do with, these other processes. What we do know is we don't want them to try to make a decision in a vacuum. We want them to come in and get familiar with what we're doing, so that they have a sense of what the value is. Right.
Yes, yes.
And I want to reiterate something I said before too, is, back in, 20, 30 years ago, in the days of the Yellow Pages rather than Google, is every now and then we would get somebody who had opened the phone book and they're, calling schools. And what they're trying to do is figure out which school to go to. And of course, you can't tell much from a Yellow Page ad. And so typically the first thing they would ask is, hey, how much are your lessons? And by the way, what the Yellow Pages people knew, if you looked at their data, and this is the same as Google, Google is just targeting it more, appropriately for them. But what Google knew is the number one thing that people were looking at was location first. So, they'd open the book and say, who's in Evergreen, or who's in Golden, or who's in, Highlands Ranch, or whatever. That was the number one thing, regardless of category, that people were looking at first. They weren't looking at who's the cheapest in this category. They were looking for who's closest to me, and then, who would be the best. That makes sense. But we would have that happen occasionally where somebody's calling through, and, staff would say, well, they're just calling through schools looking for price. I say, well, no, they're not really even doing that, because if you talk to them, really, it's just they didn't know what to ask. So they were going through trying to start a conversation. And sometimes and most of the time, basically, if they were doing that, which would be Google nowadays, most of the other schools weren't answering the phones anyway. So, my rule of thumb is whoever answered the phone first got them. And, if somebody opts into a website, my rule of thumb is whoever follows up first and gets them has got them. Very rarely are you going to get somebody who on the way in the door is shopping 3 or 4 different schools. And frankly, we're in an industry where it's not hard to be better than everybody else, because most of the competition isn't very good. That makes sense?
And Master Oliver, I also
Yeah.
pulled for Tyler, well, everybody else, the phone script that we have in a member site as well. And I went ahead and posted that up into the Facebook group. So
Yeah.
it'll redirect you to all of that material.
Yeah. And I would say the same thing is true throughout the introductory process. Is, I'm never afraid to give somebody a range, but what I'm always doing is leaving it open-ended. So what I don't want to do is somebody walks in the school and I give them the price sheet and send them home with it, right? That's too definitive. It's okay to, well, on average, it's going to range from, but it's going to, depend. We'll figure out what's going to work best for you, after we do the evaluation. I want to leave it open-ended because I don't want them making the decision by themselves. I want them making a decision with me. right? Does that make sense? It's why if I send somebody home to think about it, they don't think about it. And you know, the decision gets sideways. So far, so good. Hey, welcome, Master Summers. So this is your first time joining us, I believe. But I know and recognize everybody else here.
Yes, sir.
Oh, where's your school?
Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. Great area, great area. What do you teach?
Taekwondo mostly.
Excellent, excellent. What's your background?
I trained under Park Jung-soo in Toronto and mostly ITF Taekwondo. I've been training since 72.
Okay, okay. Look at that, Rob. We have somebody else from Canada. You trained in Toronto and then ended up in Charlotte eventually?
Yes, sir. I grew up in Buffalo and then worked for Grandmaster Park for a number of years and then moved back.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Excellent, excellent. Let's get let's get started full bore here. Master Summers, since you're new, any specific questions you have starting out here?
Oh man, hundreds.
Yeah, give it your best shot.
Well, I'm really concerned, like when we're talking about retention, and man, like we've been talking about retention for 40 years, you know, and I think trying to get that number down to 2% or something, it's like what a nut to crack. And I think for me, I feel like it's the attendance, keeping track of them and being able to really track them close. And could you talk about, because I know Grandmaster Smith had talked about the attendance boxes, and could you just go over that real quick on how you do that?
Well, sure. I mean, it's kind of off our topic of marketing, but I'll give you this for the question. Our experience is 98% of martial arts instructors think all of my students love me. My classes are great. I am great. If I just had more people coming in the door, everything would be fine. And then those same schools start the year with 200 students, enroll 200 students, and end the year with 200 students, and have a 100% turnover every year. And probably industry average is which is always a bad term because the industry is full of stupid broke people, right? But probably industry average, if you want to look at that, is somewhere between 7 and 9%. Master Clark always told me the ATA average was a little over 7% across their schools nationally because he had access to those numbers. And I've talked to school owners that, we're losing 15, 20% a month and we're happy with it. My argument against ever doing the cardio kickboxing thing was most people running that were losing 30% a month. They had a very low commitment audience that would turn over really heavy. And so you're absolutely right in that enrolling it at any given number. So if I'm at 200 active students and I can enroll 20 people a month to stay where I'm at, or I can enroll 10 people a month and lose half as many people, it's easier, cheaper, and better to lose half as many people, right? It really should be everybody's priority. And again, Master Summers, of every school I've talked to, Master Smith, you can probably echo this. I don't know how many hundreds, if not thousands of schools I've talked to individually, gone through their numbers over the years. And there's been exactly one that I ever said, well, I don't know how you get your retention better than that. And to be fair, it was Buzz Durkin and then a student of Buzz Durkin. So it was actually two separate locations. But Buzz, who's a good friend of mine, had a dropout rate of sub 1%, like 0.7% a month. So he could run 300 active students and lose a couple people a month. Now, he has the worst website I've ever seen. He has no idea how to market. Most of his students come from children or grandchildren of his students or referrals that get drug in, but he doesn't need to be, right? And that's, by the way, that's a wonderful place to be. Master Summers, the key to retention, in my view, if you want to take three pieces, and almost all of it is the opposite of what most of the industry thinks it is. What most of the industry gets all caught up in is XMA or hyper or some new curriculum thing. And all of a sudden, and you look at the trends over the years, years ago, everybody's throwing wushu because that looked cool. And then Eskrima, and then, BJJ. I mean, there's always the trends that are cool that get adopted by instructors because they think it's cool. But the three pillars, if you will, for me of retention are: number one, rapport. So the student, everybody in the school knowing their name, knowing the parent's name, knowing the kid's name, knowing the grandparent's name, using it every time they show up into class, making sure that every class they come into, they're touching them appropriately 3 or 4 times. They're making eye contact constantly. They're greeting mom, dad, grandmother, grandson, student, et cetera, by name, right? So making sure that you have that component in good shape. So it's rapport, and that's super important, especially in the first couple of months, is people are hesitant about coming. It's a new environment. They don't know people. They don't know if the instructor is going to get mad at them for forgetting something. They don't know the other students. So the level of relationship and really reaching out to them, confirming class, greeting them within 3 foot of the door, using their name immediately, using their name repetitiously, remembering things about them. The number one way to show people, the number one way to get people to like you is to like them. All the data shows that. And people get the sense of you like them by you remember things about them. I read a lot. So if somebody walked in the door with a book, I remembered what the book was. If I would chat with them about it, I would remember something about the plot. If it was a business or an education related book, oftentimes I had read it, so I would chat with them about that. Right. But you remember things. Grandma's in the hospital. You check up on her next time. They get a get well card. Grandma gets flowers at the hospital. So number one is rapport. And a lot of times what we think is if we're nice to them in class and we have, good podium skills and an exciting class, that's what our job is. That's super bare minimum. What really has to happen is you have to, wrap them in warmth and love and really have them feel appreciated, recognized on the way in the door. Number 2 is goals. You've got to really show them that this is something that they should set a goal for long term. And whether it's the kids market, adult women, adult men, almost everybody comes in with this is going to something I'm going to try out for a while, right? They don't come in with, I'm going to make this a martial arts lifestyle and I'm going to be a black belt and I'm going to follow through with this long term. So what we want to do is we want to start right at the beginning with focusing on long-term goals, on being a black belt, on committing to this long term. The reality is it's not always going to be easy, but it's going to be a worthwhile endeavor, teaching them how to set goals and then following up on those goals. Does that make sense?
That's number 2.
That's number 2. And then number 3 is never letting them fall through the cracks and staying on top of it, right? So the first 2 elements, Nick Kokinis, who Master Smith and I were friends with and to some extent mentored by, is his term was prophylactics versus therapeutics. Prophylactics meaning it's much easier to prevent the problem from happening than to fix it after the fact, right? So it's much easier to keep them from dropping out than to get them back. And so what you want to do is relationship, get them to set a goal, and never let them fall through the cracks. Now, the not letting them fall through the cracks is now you're talking about the ID card system and a couple of other things. But the ID card system, and let me start with this. There's any number of computer systems out there, software systems that will track attendance. My view is no matter how good any of them are, and I just had the co-founder or the founder of Rainmaker, and he's doing a new software. I forget what it's called now. And we were having this conversation. He actually got started by coming to some of my seminars, which I didn't recognize. Matt Smith, it seems like 90% of the industry in any level of business got started with one of our marketing boot camps or something. I just did a podcast with, I think his name is Matt Brenner. He's releasing it this Friday. And before he started recording, or maybe after he started recording, I found out that the way he got interested in the martial arts business, his brother brought him to one of the marketing boot camps when he was 15. And I'm looking at this guy going, oh my God, that makes me feel old. But
You are. But
yeah.
I'm older, so I can say that.
My favorite is that when you won the world light heavyweight kickboxing title, I was 14. So,
Well, I'm gonna put you in the stroller. No, thank you.
but on the ID card system, and in the discussion forum, we have several examples of the ID card system. But where I was going with that is, I was talking to him about class attendance and software, and they have the most sophisticated piece of software that was probably done to date in the industry. And his statement was, oh yeah, everybody should be using ID cards, and then they should be scanning them into the software as backup and for other purposes like testing lists and so forth. And that's a software maker, programmer, and so forth, right? And so the ID card system is you can look up the card. Bob, do you want to pull one of those up in the Facebook group real quickly? A sample?
Sure.
You can pull it up and share it. But the ID card, the first starting point is A side, B side, or 1 and 2. And the 1 is everybody at the beginning of the week starts in side 1. And
That's just an index card box that you get at Staples or Office Depot.
That big. It's a standard size, Matt Smith, like you said. So you can get the boxes,
They're either 3x5 or 4x6.
Yeah. But literally a card, there you go, Bob, is, yeah. So there's an example. This would be one for white belt, right? And so.
And this is not one card. This is actually 2 cards.
4. It's a 4 up.
Yeah, you got, you got 4 up there.
Yeah, that's 8.5 by 11, 4 up.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah. And just in detail, normally we would print these on whatever card stock is their belt color. This one specifically for white belt for the Mile High Karate schools, but you could have, if you wanted, the same one for all of them. And if you look at, without getting lost in the detail here, we have a couple books that are required for the white belts, what to say when you talk to yourself, and the psychology of winning. And then we have a 2-month test cycle. So they need 16 classes every 2 months. So they would want 2, and by the way, my preference would be is there's a little slash between the 2 and 3 and the 3 and 4 and the 5 and 6. So I'm keeping track of how often they're coming per week as well, if you will. But then what we're going to do is every time they come to class, they pull the card out of the box and they give it to the instructor. So it's easy when class bows in. Anybody who doesn't have an ID card, they go to the office and figure out why they don't have an ID card. But you don't let anybody start class without an ID card. They're responsible.
And for clarity, the box has dividers alphabetically, so A through Z, and you can either do it by first name or last name. It's up to you what you're going to do.
Yeah, but there's the side 1 and the side 2 with, as Matt Smith is saying, the alphabetical. So if you look in the box, the cards are coded by rank and they're coded by, I always did last name. But then when after they've turned them in for class at the end of the night, after we've dated them all, and if we're using a software system, scanned them in and so forth, they're going to go back into side 2. Now, one of the things we're going to want to have marked on this card is what their 2 days a week are. So, in every test, obviously we'd have to update that, but I have it down here that they're coming, say, Tuesday, Thursday. So now I can go through the ID card box on Monday and see everybody who normally comes in on Monday who didn't show up. I can go in side 2 on Tuesday, and by Tuesday or Wednesday, everyone who's still in side 1 hasn't been in yet this week. So now my ideal would be they miss the 6:15 class. I call them on the 6:15 class. What I found in practical terms, with big, busy schools, that was tending not to happen. But what I could get to happen in my schools is on Wednesday, we'd go through the box, figure out everybody who missed Monday or Tuesday, and call them all on Wednesday and say, hey, I noticed you missed your first class of the week. I wanted to make sure we're going to get a couple classes in still this week and check up on things. I hope Billy's not sick. I just wanted to make sure. Oh, no, we had a student teacher conference on Tuesday. We couldn't make it. Oh, okay. Well, his next class is on Thursday. Can't come tonight or Saturday or something to make up. And then you keep them from falling behind. That makes sense? And then the next step would be and you don't have to keep sharing there, Bob. Then the next step would be I get to the end of the week, and now everybody who's still inside 1, I have a box in the office and I have a tab, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, 8 week, 8 week, and so forth, right? But I pull them in the office, and one of the stats that we would keep, and I always had a big graph on the wall. And so, we'd go mark it every week. Here's how many people are in 1 week inactive. Here's how many in 2 week. Here's how many in 3 week. And then I always put another line down below is every week, how many enrollments did we do? Because if we have fewer enrollments than we have in 3 week inactive, we got a problem. If we have more enrollments than 3 week inactive, we're on positive. And then I had a benchmark of, 1 week inactive, sometimes it's maybe 10% or something like that. And if it's a holiday week, I'm not that concerned about it. But 3 week inactive, my rule of thumb is ever more than 1% is a problem. By the way, 1% translates to 4.2% a month. So really, I wanted it to be way less than that. And usually you're dealing at that level with pretty small numbers. But if it was 1% or more, it was a problem. And so we're looking at everybody who missed a week and doing everything we can not to let them get into 2 weeks. Everybody who missed 2 weeks, everything we can not to get them into 3 weeks. Because in my mind, if they went from 3 weeks to 4 weeks, that's basically where they dropped out. And if we let them get into 2 weeks, it's a real problem. But again, it's prophylactics versus therapeutics. I'd rather catch that here's a student who is doing 3 weeks, 3 times a week, than 2 times a week, than 1 time a week. And I catch them and I do a progress update. Maybe I do a little short private. I do a goal setting update. I renew and refresh their goals and figure out what's going on there and get them caught up before they ever fade out. And what I see a lot of times is, especially MMA schools are the worst about this. It seems like MMA schools and BJJ schools, Muay Thai schools have kind of looked at fitness centers and made it their model. And then they think people are active if they're ACH cleared, right, for their billing. No, they're active if they came to class twice this week. And in practical terms, when we're counting active count numbers, we're talking about how many people came this month. So that's the current week, 1, 2, and 3 week. But I know by the time they're getting into 2 and 3 week, they're a group that's really hard to get back in. Is that making sense so far? And it really is the right question because, again, some of you know Dave Kovar. Tim and Dave and I were good friends for years. Still are, but that's back when Dave and Tim were partners. And they had this one school that was I don't know, 13,000 square feet or so forth. But Tim's conversation about that school was feeding the beast. Every month they had to have 50 new students in the door to keep it even. Well, that's a horrible hamster on a treadmill problem to have, right? And I'll add one other thing to it, is over the years, I think all of us as martial artists, we want to see high talent people on the floor. We want to see high talent instructors. We'd like to see fast paced, exciting classes. The schools that I have seen that had the absolute best retention weren't high energy, the music is blaring, and we're doing XMA. They weren't exciting curriculum, and we're constantly throwing in new things to keep you excited. Matt Smith, the example of Buzz Durkin, he teaches the most boring ass Wichi-Roo system I've ever seen. They learned like 5 forms over 22 years. I mean, it's, but the key is Buzz is the nicest human being you can ever meet. The 2 nicest people in martial arts are probably Stephen Hayes and Buzz Durkin. He knows everybody's name. If any little service failure happens, he's actually absolutely traumatized, and he's running around trying to fix it. And he never misses a thing. If a student comes in and they just got a new car, next time they come in, he bought a gas card for them. And I just wanted to celebrate your card. He has the local florist. He has Buzz Durkin coffee mugs. And so if any little service gap happens, they get flowers in the Buzz Durkin coffee mug. And I could go on and on and on forever. But the key to retention, rapport, goals, and not let anybody slip through the cracks.
And if I can just do a
Yeah.
2-minute wrap up of what you just said, but I was the first one to ever do the attendance cards. We started it back at the June Rhee organization back in 1970. And the reason we started is the same thing you said there, Master Summers, was that we were losing too many students. So as much as we were marketing and we were getting a lot of new students, as fast as we could get them in the front door, they were going out the back door. So one of my pet phrases was always, what gets measured gets done. So what we started doing is having the attendance cards, so we knew exactly when somebody was there and when they weren't there. And if they weren't there, we were able to give them a call and do a makeup class and keep them on track. So the main thing is you have to know how to count, first of all, your active students. And what is the definition of an active student? And an active student is a student that has been to class in the last 30 days. And if they haven't been to class in the last 30 days, then they are considered a dropout. So after 1 week, if they're not there, we pull their card and we put them in box 3, which is in the office. And that's our box to make sure that they don't end up in week 4, because in the office, there's only 4 dividers: week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. And we have a whole week to get them back in before they go into week 2. And then we have another full week before they go into 3, and then another week before they go into 4. And once they go into 4, they're considered a dropout. So if I count all of my active students at the beginning of the month, and I didn't lose anybody, then I would have the same amount at the end of the month. But of course, we had new enrollments. So I take that beginning number plus all the students that joined that month. And that would tell me if I didn't have any, if I had 0 dropout, that's how many I should have. So when I then count the cards at the end of the month, I do the math, and then I know how many actually dropped out, so I can then actually calculate an accurate percentage, because you cannot measure anything unless you have an accurate system of doing it. But once you do that, it was such an eye-opener for our instructors when the percentages were so high that we started having them do reports on a monthly basis to show exactly how many they had, how many they lost, what the percentage was. And now that they were reporting on that, they would actually see it. So they were measuring it. So now those percentages of the dropout started going down, retention started going up. But it's a simple 3-box system. All through the years, people have tried all different variations with scanners and codes and iPads and everything else. Nothing works as good as the simple 3-box system. Box 1, first class this week. Box 2, second class or more this week. So when they come in, they pull it out of 1, give it to the instructor. He signs it, puts a date on it. At the end of the night, we put it back in box 2. Can't get any simpler than that. At the end of the week, any card left in box 1 means they haven't been in. That goes into box 3 in week 1. And then now the race is on. Can we get them back in before they're considered a dropout? So that's the simple. But those 3 steps that Master Oliver said, rapport, the attendance card, and the third thing that he hinted to, but he didn't actually say it. The third one is actually renewing them to black belt, to put them on a black belt program. What we found is once we got them committed to a longer goal than just the first year, they were a lot more likely to stick with it. Now, of course, we had to do those other 2 things to make it happen. But number 3, somebody's either in that first year going to sign up for black belt or they're going to drop out. Well, what we found is that there were more people at the beginning of the year to renew than there is at the end of the year. So we did just the opposite of what most people thought back then. Most people thought you renew them at the end of the year. We started renewing them in the first or second month because we wanted to set their goal to black belt and get them on a black belt vision and a higher goal. And that's what also helps with the retention. Does that help, Master Summers?
Mhm.
Yeah. The and I guess the last thing on that topic is what you on the prophylactic side is, this is an example from years ago. But one of my friends, Jeff, you know him, he was in Columbia, Maryland, Will Mayer. And he had the weirdest ass curriculum. He was a ninja school and one thing or another. But he also had incredible student retention. And he had, at that time, 600-700 active students. And they had whiteboards on the wall of the classroom, every student listed, and every class they updated with how many classes they had, how many classes they needed until testing. And then they would go through with each individual student where they were, whether they were ahead, on track, or behind. And the ID card, of course, accomplishes the same thing, but it was every class. The focus with each individual student was, here's how many lessons you have. Here's how many lessons you need to be at the test. You're 2 lessons behind. Let's get caught up this week, right? So they were always on top of that. So they never let people get behind. And that's part of what we do. I mean, ask me if I went back to when you would come to Tulsa and test me and the rest of the, the gang. Well, back then the tests were erratic and sporadic, and a lot of people would train really hard once there was a test date set, and then they'd be sloughing off and between times. But if they know, okay, I'm doing every 2 months, so the next test is the next graduation is April 20th, and the test is going to be the week before the graduation. If they know that's my target, and I've got to have 16 classes, or, for our black belts, they'll know, here's the next test. I have to have 32 classes and 16 teaching credits. And so then I'm looking at that every class and reminding them, you're a couple classes short, you're a couple teaching classes short, one thing or another, so that they're aware of where they're at. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions on that? I mean, it's not exactly a marketing topic, but the you know, Nick's analogy was always, you know, you're putting water into a bucket and it's, you know, you got how many holes do you have in the bucket? How bad is it leaking? And if I want to grow a school to 300 active students, let's say that's the target, is the problem is if I have a big dropout rate, the bigger the school gets, the more people are leaving every month, right? So I end up with the number of people I need to grow the school going up. As the bigger the school gets, the more people I need to grow the school. So if I was losing 300 active students, if I was losing 10% a month, I need 30 new people to stay even. If I'm losing 7% a month, I need 21. On the other hand, if I'm losing 2 or 3% a month, let's say 3, at 9 students, I'm even, and at 20 students, I grew by 11. Matt Smith, I remember, you know, back in the EFC days, I don't know why it is, but you know, Nick and the rest of the gang really didn't understand that. And, you know, I would do, you know, Excel spreadsheets or, you know, VisiCalc or whatever it was back, the original iteration, and show people how it worked. And they just didn't understand, you know, their focus was always on enrolling people. And what I was finding back then, you know, the people that all the martial artists were going and watching their classes because they were so exciting. Steve LaValle, Ernie Reyes, to a lesser extent, Dave Kovar. They were also the ones that didn't have very good retention. You know, we were all looking at the wrong things. You know, Keith Hafner, when he took off Master Smith, and, you know, and hell, 20 years ago, he started topping 100, 120,000 a month. They all thought he was a marketing genius. I said, no, it's not. He's not a marketing genius. His dropout rate's half of what you guys' dropout rate is. You know, he went from enrolling like 7 people a month to 20 people a month, but he also was dropping out probably a third of what Ernie was dropping out, a third of what LaValle was dropping out, a third of what Kovar was dropping out per month on a percentage basis.
And that's why they need to really understand how to calculate their net enrollment each month. And if you don't know what your net enrollment is each month, then you never know how to predict how many students you're going to have. Net enrollment is the how many students came in minus how many went out. So if I had 20 new come in, but I had 10 go out, 10, you know, not be there in the last 30 days, then I had a net 10. That means in 1 year, I can have 120 more active students. So that's how you get to be to 300 or 400 active students, is just by having a good net enrollment. Some schools, we look at it and it's not a net enrollment, a positive, it's a negative. So maybe they had a -5 enrollment. They had 15 come in and 20 drop out. So if you're not tracking that, you don't know whether you're trending up or trending down. And if you remember this one saying to help keep you on track, you're either green and growing or you're ripe and rotting. And if you're green and growing, means your active count is going up, which means your gross will be going up. If your active count is going down, that means that your gross is going to be going down. It might not go down for a month or two because you might have had a couple paid in fulls or something, but it will go down if they drop out. Most people, when they drop out, will keep paying their tuition for a month or two until they realize they're not coming back, and then they'll quit paying.
Yeah. So any questions on that?
Master Oliver, I have
Go
a
ahead.
different question, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
In terms of marketing, you know, we're new to your program, so I feel like there's 10,000 things we're trying to do at once, you know? So I wanted to kind of get your advice on events as the summer months are coming up and more things are happening outside. You know, we have to look at things like, sometimes it's pretty cheap to just get a booth at an event, but some of them, you know, want several $100s, you know, to do it. And
Cheap.
so, you know, what kind of events do you prioritize? Do you always get a booth? Do you sometimes just try to flyer? I mean, it probably seems more professional to get the booth, right? But what's your, I know you'd mentioned like the county fairs. Um, would we be better off doing something like the marathon where people are more health oriented anyway? Or should we just focus on families or just focus on volume? Or, what kind of events and how do you, strategize once you're there?
Well, let's start with this. You start by getting as big, as strong an idea as possible about who the audience is, right? And there's always going to be an opportunity for some of them to be bad. But a lot of these big events are annual. So, you'll have to figure out how many shots you give it before you write it off if it doesn't work out well. And Tim, this goes back to your question about high schools as well, if Tim is still there. But just passing out flyers in an event doesn't do you much good. Okay. Doing a demo at an event is pretty worthless. And I say pretty worthless, not 100%. We would go to the Boy Scout Jamboree, and one of the reasons they would let us in is we would be, we would put a demo together and do a demo. But the entire point of the demo was to drive up to the booth. But if you go through the events that are likely to pull the best, I mean, my ideal is a lot of people are going to show up, and it's going to be a lot of parents with their kids, right? And so, like Matt Smith, one of the events here that we had everybody watch was called Westminster Fair. And I don't know, there were several thousand families there, and they're out, and there's, dunk tanks and everything else. And I forget how many appointments they made, but it was something like 200 and probably could have done more. Right. The marathon, that's, our example of, Colby Winkler, did a marathon and set up a booth, and he made, I forget what it was, Master Smith. 220 appointments in 4 hours. So, and by the way, the ratios on those things will tend to be, if you do it right, you're doing the table, they fill out the information, they spin the wheel, and then you make an appointment. And if you script it right, you'll have worst case 75%, best case approaching 100% make an appointment on the spot. That's an important aspect of these things, because once you get a bunch of leads, nowadays it's increasingly difficult to convert them. Doesn't mean you don't try, but just banging the phones, people don't answer, unknown numbers, and all kinds of stuff. So, that the first number is, of all the leads you collect, let's say you get 90% to appointment. Of all the appointments you make, typically you'll get worst case 50% to show up for an intro. So if I made 100 appointments, I now have 50 intros or more. We've had as many as 75, 80% show up, but worst case, half. And then of everybody who shows up for an intro, worst case, half of them you end up enrolled. Now,
I do know those exact numbers that average over our members. Our overall average with all our members is 80% make an appointment. 50 to 60% show up. So that means you're going to have at least 40 to 50 show up, and then at least half of those will sign up. So we have estimated at 100 leads. If you get 100 leads, that should get you anywhere from 20 to 30 enrollments. And here's a sample of a spin wheel and a booth and a table. And one other thing to remember, Shannon.
And by the way, the only bad thing about this table is Colby is standing behind the table, which you would never actually do in practice.
I did even ask him about that. And he said the reason he did that is because he didn't want to block the table for the picture.
Exactly.
He was standing out in front the rest
Yeah.
of the time,
Yeah.
but for the picture, he wanted
Yeah.
everybody to see what was there. And one other thing, Shannon, when you decide on what live event to do them all. Do everything wherever people gather, because our members surprise us all the time. They've done farmers market. They've done these furniture big. They have these expos, like a furniture expo where the families come in, and they've done that and been successful. Back to school marathons, farmers. Well, I already said farmers markets, but
home improvement at Home Depot, home improvement.
Yeah, anything where people gather, you set
families.
up a booth and a wheel. And remember what you're trying to do here. If it costs you a couple $100, that's peanuts compared to, you get one enrollment, that should get you at least $500 or $600 down plus a year's tuition. So if I just got one enrollment and I had to pay $500, I've got a heck of a return on that, at least a 10-to-1 return on that investment. So some people are dollar wise and penny foolish, or is it the other way around? But don't pass those up.
Penny wise, dollar, whatever. But events that don't work are events where nobody shows up. We had an event here in Denver called All About Kids, and it worked great for 5 or 6 years. And then the last 2 years we did it, there were more vendors than there were people showing up for the event. And truthfully, we made it productive that way as well, because we lined up all kinds of stuff with daycares and private schools and Huntington Market Centers.
He's talking about the other vendors that were there. We did some cooperative marketing with them.
Exactly. But occasionally you end up at an event, St. Patrick's Day event, and there's nothing but drunk college students there. That's not very productive. But there's any number of events that will work really well. One of the events is blockbuster movie opening in a big AMC or Regal cinema. Now it has to be a blockbuster and has to attract the right audience. Last year was a horrible year for movies, and of course COVID stuff kind of killed them off for a while. But last year we had one of our clients did, I think, 110 appointments from the Mario Brothers movie. The Guardians of the Galaxy was a huge one. And yeah, they'll usually charge you for a booth. Sometimes the way into doing the booth is as a nonprofit route. And we were always doing that. Oftentimes the rationale where we were raising money for the local children's hospital or something like that. I had set up our own 501c3, which we never really had to use for those purposes. But if it's nonprofits are all that's allowed, go in and do it as a fundraiser for a nonprofit. And if it's if they don't care about that and they're just charging you for a booth or whatever, or if they're looking for entertainment, hell, do a demo and point them to the booth and so forth. And I'd always rather teach a class than actually perform. But all of those work. What if you go through the list is, if I just pass out flyers, then if I pass out 1,000 flyers, maybe I get one phone call. I've used the ratio before, and this was a school owner in Chicago. We were doing a seminar together, and he said he did 50 enrollments a month, and nobody else asked, so I asked. I said, well, how, what are you doing to do 50 enrollments a month? And he's a Taekwondo school in Chicago. He said, oh, we just do flyers. Okay, can I see the flyer? And he showed me the flyer, and I'm probably the leading advertising expert in the industry, and it wasn't any big deal. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. And the next question is, well, how many flyers do you pass out per month? And his answer was 100,000. Well, the ratio is about right. If you put out 100,000 flyers a month, it's good for 50 enrollments. If you put out 10,000 flyers a month, it's probably good for, 3, 4, 5 enrollments. But if you go to a live event and just hand out flyers, odds are you won't get any, right? And then secondarily, if I set up a booth and I sit behind the booth and wait for people to come up and talk to me, maybe 2 or 3 people come up and talk to me, but it's not going to be much. Then next is I create a reason for them to come to the booth. The easiest, simplest one is do the price wheel, preferably get one that lights up and makes noise. And the script is, hey, come over here, spin the wheel, win a prize. And I was laughing, Matt Smith. I went to a art fair or something like that up in a field in Evergreen, Colorado. And sure enough, there was one booth with a prize wheel. They had 50 people in line, and none of the other booths had anybody. And had
It wasn't martial arts. It was just something else,
it
right?
was the State Farm guy.
Yeah.
The State Farm guy.
I think he learned from one of our live events.
Yeah, frickin' the insurance guy, right? And so that's the easiest. And then when they come spin the wheel, you capture the lead, but the results skyrocket now if you make the appointment on the spot. They probably always would have. We just didn't know any better.
It's critical that you get their contact information, preferably a cell number, email, home address, all of that information, because it gives you more avenues to contact them. Even if they don't make an appointment, we want all of that information, because then we can text them, we can email them, we can direct mail them.
Yeah,
So-
it's why in practice business cards are worthless, right? Yeah, if you want to have them, great. Have a guest pass on the back. But if I'm in an interaction with somebody and I leave them with my business card, likelihood of them getting home with the business card, remembering that they have it, following up is like 1 in 100. On the other hand, if they give me their information and now I can follow up by retargeting on Facebook, Google, I can email them, I can text them, I can phone call, I can direct mail, then my odds go up dramatically. And the next step is if I make the appointment on the spot, so now we don't have to chase them down, the odds go up dramatically again. So the rule of thumb is anytime you're face to face with somebody or on the phone, never leave the interaction without having an appointment for the next follow-up, right? Never leave it open-ended, never leave it where they're going to follow up with you.
Okay, thank you. And could you clarify, you said there was opportunities sometimes to cooperatively market with other vendors, like leaving flyers there? Could you clarify what that means?
No, not leaving flyers. I mean, putting out rack cards in your area is that equivalent, and that's useful. But what I meant specifically is that example is we were at a fair for kids, and for parents. So everybody who had a booth there, who was a vendor there, had the same audience that we had. So now what I did is I just met with all of them. Some of them ran private schools, they ran tutoring services, some of them ran daycares, others did dance or pick something, and they all have our audience. So, I can, with each one of them, I can figure out a win-win. Maybe I come in and do a little class for their students. You can go through the list. The music schools have, what do they call it? Dance recitals, and music recitals and so forth. Well, I could be at their recital, so, the 7-year-old girls have brothers, that might like to do martial arts, or they might like to do ballet and martial arts. With most of them, I can find something that's a win-win, and we're not in competition with them.
Right. So you're networking, not necessarily at that event, but you're like, okay, we have the same demographic. We could. All right. I see. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How can I help you? And let's figure out something to do together. Matt Smith, I got to jump off to another appointment. You want to stay on and do some more Q&A for a minute? Matt
Mr.
Smith.
Smith's muted.
Yeah, I just made you host, so I
Okay.
don't do a Greg Moody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as you guys didn't run out of questions here.
Yeah. As a reminder, and Matt Summers will talk talk to you about that. For everybody else, our next live meeting is in May. Mass Summers, we'd love to have you there. Make sure you booked your room right away, because turns out it's a busy time for people to come to Colorado with, I guess, high school graduations, college graduations, weddings, everything else. The hotel that we're at, they booked a small number of room, and if that one sells out, Bob, let me know, and we'll do some alternative hotels. But it's a Comfort Suites Evergreen. On Thursday, we're going to be at my home, and then for our $1 Million Schools, we're going to be at my home on Sunday, and otherwise we'll be at the Comfort Suites on Friday for Quick Start members.
Yeah, May 16th and through the 19th.
And I got to jump off here.
Okay, my master, just make sure, guys, if you're coming, that you RSVP with Bob. We really need a head count for all of our activities that we're doing, and lunches and stuff like that, and hotels and all. So as soon as you know if you're coming or not, if you have any more questions about the event and what days and what times and that kind of stuff, you can just give Bob Dunn a call, and he'll answer all those. And we do recommend that you also bring some of your key staff, not necessarily part-timers, but if you have any full-timers, it really helps. Our school owners that have brought staff before have told us that it really cuts down the learning process for staff, because when you go to the event, you pick up what you can. And of course, like anything, nobody can remember 100% of what they hear. So of what you remember, you go back and you share with them, and then they're going to pick up a percentage of what you teach them. But if they're there, then you both are going to be able to share what you've learned and actually get a lot more results. So keep that in mind. Some schools tell us, oh, I can't go because I don't have anybody to cover my classes. Well, if you don't have anybody to cover your classes, then just close your school for a couple days, because it's no different than the public schools. When they say they have a teacher work day, you just tell them that we're going to Colorado for instructor training that is going to help the school and the students. And but for what happens at those live events, what most of our members tell us is that they get more information in those few days than they've gotten on the meetings for like a total of 3 months, maybe. So, and Jeff, we just did one at your school. Maybe you can just elaborate a few minutes on that.
Just real quick. Absolutely. I've been with the group on and off for a while, and the live meetings are really worth it. One, you get a chance to go ahead and meet everybody. And actually the side conversations are the ones that can really help you out, because then you can buddy up with somebody and you can even ask them anything you need to ask them. The other thing that allows you a chance to go ahead and grow is, like he said, everything is compressed. Everything that they go over the course of, I want to say 6 months to a year, is compressed into those meetings. And when that happens, you will be blown away with the amount of information that's there. But then you have support of asking people, what to do. I met really cool people. I met Rob. I met a bunch of people out there that came out to my school. It was just a really great experience. And you form friendships where they can help you in anything that you want to do. It was like totally, I wasn't even asking. And people were making suggestions for me to do different things, to get more mat space, to go ahead and do my own signage and things like that. And I was like, well, yeah, I never thought of that. And you just get ideas left and right. And I know that just showing up to the meetings, I get ideas all the time. But when you go to a live meeting, it's like it is just ridiculous, a ridiculous amount of information. And it definitely would have a recorder, video as much as you can, and definitely transcribe as much as you can, because I'll tell you what, it's just too much information to understand and comprehend. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have all and any questions that you have regarding your operation, because if you don't get a chance to go and ask it like in front of everybody else, you can ask anybody else and they'll be more than willing to help out. And if they're not, just ask me. I'll be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
sir.
Rob, I know this was the one last month was the first one you were able to come to because you're in Canada and they kind of put the halt to you guys coming across the border there for a couple of years because of the COVID thing. Maybe you could fill everybody in for just a couple minutes.
I was just going to add to,
I'm sorry.
Hold on one second, Tomas.
Yes.
Rob.
to Jeff's point, it was great. Yeah, it was great meeting Jeff there. Great meeting everyone, you guys. And we teach our students all the time. We teach our students about, you know, being in the right group and having positive peer pressure. And that's what we need for ourselves. We need to have that positive peer pressure because, like Master Oliver was saying before, like the industry is just plagued with people with a, you know, unfortunately a broke mindset. To be in the right room with martial artists with the right mindset puts the right peer pressure on where you need to be. And it, you know, it gives you that, you know, the proof of all the results to help you. And the live meetings are huge. And I remember that the last live meeting I did, well, years ago, we did a live meeting in Sterling at Grandmaster Smith school. And I joked I bought a car after that. I bought my Lexus and I named it Sterling, and Master Oliver made fun of me for it, of course. But I mean, the Sterling trip paid for that car. So although it was a dorky thing to do, I would do it again in a heartbeat. And I was just texting Grandmaster Smith that now things are going well. I just actually bought a house yesterday. I bought my dream home. And I think I'm going to name it Norfolk because that trip that you said is probably going to pay for that house as well. So when you're thinking like, what does it cost me to get to these groups? It's not what it costs. It's you know, the growth potential from getting those live meetings is like, it's unfathomable.
Well, I guess you're gonna have to have something new for Golden, right? You're gonna have to call something Golden coming up next month. Okay, Tomas, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Do I have to fill it up an application or how can I do it now? That's a question. Another one is
Wait, say that question again.
Do I have to fill it up an application to assist over there?
Just
Or-
call Bob Dunn.
Bob Dunn. Okay. Because
And you,
my
you
wife,
have Bob's number, right?
yes.
Yes,
I
just
have a-
call Bob because he's going to ask you a few questions so he can make sure he finds out how many are coming, where you're staying. He's going to give you the hotel information with the special rates and the hours that we're going to be training and things like that, when to fly in, what airport. So he's going to go through all the questions
Okay.
and answer all those for you.
Okay. And I have one more question, but I want to do for our next meeting tomorrow because I got a doubt about the attendance cards and the ID cards. I have a
Perfect.
question, but I will do it tomorrow.
Okay,
We have a meeting
quick
tomorrow,
start.
right?
Yes, sir. Quick start
Okay.
meeting.
It's gonna be quick start. 2 meetings at 12 to 1 and 1 to 2, or just one?
Well, it's 2:00 Eastern time.
So it's gonna be 1 o'clock.
Well, 1:00 your time if you're in
Uh-huh.
Central Time Zone.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So our gym uses Rainmaker, and I have an appointment with the staff tomorrow about training on the software. I've been trying to keep stats, and I've noticed that like when I have my own spreadsheet and I'm like putting in numbers, there's people coming in and talking to me. It's very difficult to like keep the stats. And you know, so I guess my question is tomorrow when I have that meeting with them, what are like the key big stats that I should know so that I can ask them so that I know where to find those stats on the software? So what are the big stats keeping track of each month?
I have a stat sheet that I put together for everybody that I posted on our Facebook group. I'll repost that, but that sheet, the sheet that I posted, it's a whole year spreadsheet. And the reason I have it, I don't want people to bury all that information in their computer where they have to go to their computer to get it. Even though you can keep updating it on your computer, I want it on a clipboard, and it's a monthly summary of each month for 2024. And the first column on that sheet is last year's averages. Last year's monthly average for 2023. And these are the things that are going to be on that stat sheet. And these are the things that you have to keep track of. How many leads that you're getting. Now, again, these are the big things. There's also some more details to those. If you want to keep, once you get those down, you can actually refine them a little bit. But let's talk about the basics. Leads. And a lead is anytime you get contact information from anybody, whether it's online, whether it's a live event, whether it's a walk-in, whether it's a call. The only thing that you can do to make that a little better is to actually have where the source came from. You follow me? So I don't just have 100 leads, but I got 30 of them from a live event. I got 10 of them from the internet, etc. So you go through, I had 5 of them came from a walk-in. I had 10 of them come from a buddy event. Oh, did we just lose him?
I can hear you.
We
I
just,
can hear you.
oh, there he is. Somebody jumped off, so it moved you over there, Tyler. So keeping track of those leads. And then, of course, even though we're keeping track of individual ones, right? But on the monthly summary, it's all the leads are going to be together. Because our magic number, and remember this number, if you want to be green and growing, and if you're following our systems correctly, you should be able to be green and growing and be $1 million school in 2 years. If you're tracking these numbers, but you get 100 leads, don't get 50 leads, don't get 30, get 50. Whatever the hell you have to do to get the 100. Because I find if you do the systems right, 100 will get you 20 to 30 enrollments. And if you get 20 to 30 enrollments, that means you're adding to your school 250 to 350 more students in 1 year. So then all you have to do is not lose too many of those. You are going to lose some. But the idea is, how many are you going to lose? That's going to be based on your monthly net enrollment. You follow me?
Yeah.
So leads is number 1. 2 is appointments. A lead is no better than getting an appointment. And the best time to get the appointment is when you make that first contact. If you have a system where you have to follow up later to get the appointment, we want to try to eliminate those steps. So leads and appointments. And then the next one is the intros. How many of those appointments actually came in for a first intro? And then the second intro, because that's where we usually close them, because the first lesson is a semi-private class. Don't make the mistake of trying to close them on the first class unless they're adults. They're making the decision. If you have a good rapport and you think they like that well enough that when you tell them the price, it's not going to blow them away. That's why we add more value by getting them in a regular class so we can spotlight them. They can earn their white belt. So there's some things that happen in that first class that helps sell. We do what's called selling from the floor. And when you're in the class and they're working in a group environment, it's easier to spotlight them and catch them doing something good, and everybody gives them a hand. And now they earned their white belt and they got their belt in front of the class and everybody clap for them. You see, so there's a lot of things that go on that happen in that second class that when they come into the office, they're already sold. See, don't think that you're selling them in the office. You sell them in the classroom. So we have to have, if I don't get my first coming back for the second, so how many of those first should be coming back? Well, at least 95%. But we've got some schools, for some reason, they'll have, let's say 51st, and then only 32 seconds. And out of those 32 seconds, then they only end up with 20 enrollment conferences. See, we have to know also how many enrollment conferences you get. Everybody that takes a second should have an enrollment conference. Don't schedule it another day. Do it that day while, you heard the expression, strike while the iron is hot. Because in that second class, that's when they just earned their white belt. You got a chance to spotlight them. Most of the schools are giving them a uniform when they come back for that second lesson, because that's what I call sweeten the kitty or sweeten the pot, because it gives them a reason to come back for that second lesson. Not only are they going to get to do a class, but with our special 2-week trial this month, you also receive a free uniform. Now, some of the schools like the BJJ schools or something, sometimes their uniforms are pretty expensive. So what they do is they'll give them their school t-shirt and the pants. And then when they enroll, they get the school top, the official uniform top. You follow me? But we've got to track leads, appointments, first intro, second intro. How many of those enrolled? How many of those did we renew? Renew means that we signed them up for the black belt training. And then we need to know what the total gross is. And then we need to know what the active count is. And then it's not on that summary, but some of the extra things that people will keep is how many enrollment conferences did they have, even though that's not on that stat sheet. The stat sheet are the basics. We look at all of those numbers and we see which ones are off track. And the ones that are off track, then we can break it down and then fix that one part. See, when you don't keep numbers and your gross isn't up and you don't have a lot of enrollments, then it's no way to fix it unless you, where did I mess up? Well, I messed up because I didn't get but 30 leads, or I messed up because I got 100 leads, but I only got 40 appointments, or I got 80 appointments, but only 20 of them signed up. You see where the holes are? That's what Master Oliver's talking about, the holes in the bucket. The leads are, think of the leads as the water. They go into the bucket. What we try to do is get as many of those to enroll as possible. But we know when we go from lead to appointment, there's a hole in the bucket because 100% don't make an appointment. When those appointments come for their first intro, there's another hole in the bucket because we know 100% aren't coming in for the first. When they come back for the second, there's another hole in the bucket because we know that 100% aren't going to come back for the second. Then when we do the enrollment conference, there's another hole in the bucket because we know that not everybody's going to get an enrollment conference, even though we tell them that they need to. And then when they enroll, we know we're not going to enroll 100% of the ones that do an enrollment conference. So there's another hole in the bucket. You see where all this goes? So you see where the big stuff is. Now, the reason I like it on one spreadsheet like that, that's on a clipboard, is because my goal each month is to beat last year's average. My goal in March is to beat January and February. Even if I beat last year's average, I want to make March a higher month. March is a very important, pivotal month. You know why, Tyler?
Because usually the springtime is when the sun comes out. People typically, at least from my experience, people start to enroll
more. That
more.
all makes sense, but Rob, tell them why March is a pivotal month.
It's the end of the first quarter.
Who said that?
I did, Dina.
Good job. Give her a hand.
Thank you, sir.
You see, we have to realize that we're not just running our school, collecting money, and what happens. Don't be a hypocrite. What do we teach our students to do if they want to be successful in life? We teach them to set goals. Well, if we're not setting goals for ourselves, if I don't have a goal of what I need to make this month, and I will tell you, as much as I preach this back and forth, guys, what is your goal this month? Well, it's to do as much as I can. No, put realistic numbers down there. How do I know what that realistic number is, Master Summers? You're muted, sir.
Yes, sir. We know what's realistic by comparing it with last month or last year.
Give him a hand. I mean, here he is, the newest guy on the block, and even he knows that. Do you have last year's average where you can see it, and last month on one spreadsheet where you can compare to see if you're green and growing or if you're ripe and rotting?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So I've got to make sure for March, I should have had a monthly goal, but I also should have had what else, Dina? You're muted there, Dina. It looks like a cartoon. She can't unmute herself. She said it before, a quarterly goal. So in March, my goal might be above my normal. Let's say and I will tell you, everybody blows these goals off the chart the first year, maybe even the second year, because they haven't ever been doing all this stuff that we're teaching you. And all of a sudden in that first year, schools are doubling, tripling, and quadrupling their grosses. Schools are going from 15 to 20 to 50 or 60. And maybe in the second year, 70 to 80. And by the third year, 80 to 100. Some even faster than that. But I tell everybody you should have a low goal and a high goal. I call the low goal the minimum. What is my minimum? Well, my minimum I better at least be growing. So I always had my schools, when I was running the junior organization, we had 12 schools. Everybody had a minimum goal of 10% growth. And their high goal was 20%. Well, I might do 30% this month. I might do 40, which is going to make my quarter average, because I'm also going to put that into my quarterly goal. And then at the end of 24, I'll have all those increases. And then when I'm doing my goals for 25, they're going to be 10 to 20% above what we did in 24. You following me on this, Master Summers?
Yes, sir.
So if I have those goals, you see, if I sit back and watch, and even though I'm keeping track of the numbers, if I'm not doing anything to take control, think of it like the captain of the ship. And all of a sudden the boat gets off track. He's got to make those adjustments to get it back on track. If I'm a pilot and I'm flying and I'm off course, I've got to watch my instruments to make sure that I'm staying on course. And if I see they're off, I've got to make adjustments to get back on course. That's why, Master Summers, since you're the new one, the others might have heard this before. Do you know when you're having a bad month?
Well, you can see the numbers aren't coming in. It's like, geez, right away, because each week I have goals. I should get
Thank
each
you.
week.
You see, with that mindset, the stuff we're doing is going to resonate with you, and you'll be able to get better results quicker when you're using what we call black belt thinking. Because you know what most schools do? They wait till the end of the month and then they're calling or texting me saying, I had a bad month. What should I do? And you know what I always ask them first question? When did you decide you were having a bad month? And they'll say, well, at the end of the month, you know, I could see that I had a bad month. I said, well, if you would have looked closer, you would have probably saw in the first week that you weren't on track to finish the month if you hadn't completed a fourth of your goal. And at the second week, if you hadn't completed 50% of your goal, you're not having a good month. You follow me? Just like you said, Master Summers. So don't just keep those weekly stats, but in my meeting, when I'm going over it with my staff, what I'm telling everybody is, hey, huddle up here. We got to change our game plan because whatever the hell we've been doing ain't working. So what the hell are we going to do? Well, I look at all the stats, and maybe the first thing that I notice is that my leads are so far down. So how do I make the adjustments with my staff? What do I need to tell them, Master Summers, since I'm picking on you since you're new?
I don't know. I was writing. I can't write fast enough.
Well, here's the good thing, Master Summers. All these meetings are recorded. We send you a copy of it so you can go back and write more notes on stuff. So do take good notes, but do know that if you miss anything, it will. So what I was saying is that, okay, I looked at the first week and I noticed that my leads were way down. So what's got to be the game plan for next week?
We got to make up for the lost leads. We got
And how are we going to do that?
Do more of anything we should have done the first week, double it up.
Not screw up like we did last week is what we need to do, right? Well, specifically, what we have to do is more marketing. What do I need to do? Well, guess what happens on your marketing? I usually did it by the 20th of the previous month. I had my marketing set for the following month. You know how I decided what I needed to market in? I took it and divided it into 3 areas and made sure that I had 5 to 10 things in each one of those areas. Number 1, internal marketing. Number 2, external marketing. And number 3, internet marketing. So I've got to make sure that my marketing plan for March is set before the end of February, just like my marketing plan for April. And guess what I'm doing with this marketing plan, Master Summers? I'm writing it all down. So by the end of the year, guess what I have ready for next year? My annual marketing plan. Because I can do the same things that I did, 95% of them or 90% of them that I did this year, I can do next year. I'm also looking this month what worked to make adjustments if I'm doing it next month to make sure that I don't make those same mistakes. So I've got to analyze my marketing results. I analyze my marketing results 2 ways. 1, by their effectiveness. How many leads did I get? Number 2, by the return on the investment. Everything that I spend money on, I have to justify making sure that was a good investment. So I have to break it down. If I spent this much on that live event and on my marketing, let's say for the month, I spent, let's say $5,000 just for round numbers on marketing. How many leads did how many enrollments? Let's say I only got 10 enrollments. So how much did each enrollment cost me, Master Summers? I want you to use that high school math.
Well, so how much did you spend again?
5,000. It got me 10 enrollments. So how much did each enrollment get me? It cost you how much for each enrollment?
500.
There you go. You see, you never thought you're going to be using all that education they taught you in high school. So it's not the algebra and the calculus and all that. Hell, it's just basic math that we use all the time. I don't know why they confused us with all that other trigonometry and all that other shit. So basic math. Okay, it cost me 500. How much did I get from each of those enrollments? Well, every school is different, right? But I'm talking at your school. I would add what the down payment was plus the first month's tuition. That's what I would get immediately in that first month. And that needs to be at least $500. Why? Because then my marketing didn't cost me anything. I got completely covered in the first month. Now I've got 11 more months on contract that they're going to be paying $250 to $350 a month or more back over the next 11 months. So what kind of return? How often would I want to spend that $500? Every day, right? But you see what I'm talking about? When you're looking at marketing, you've got to analyze it. What are the results? What did it cost me? What was the return? So when I say keep your numbers, you also have to understand the numbers. You have to know how to fix those numbers when they're off. You got to know how to plug those holes in the bucket. And that's what we're going to be here to teach you how to do. But you first have to be aware of the problem and the situation, and you've got to keep track of it because we're not at your school. But if you keep me those basic stats, I can look at those stats and I can tell you exactly where you need to fill your holes in your bucket and tell you exactly what we need to do next month to make it better. That's why being on these meetings and asking questions, because maybe the numbers didn't go your way and you want to get a clarification on what did I do wrong by explaining at the meeting, and that everybody learns from that example. You follow me?
Yes, sir.
Deanne, you have a question? Yep.
I do. So for live events, what is your mileage radius? How far out should we be marketing to live events?
Well, that's a good question, but demographics are different in all different areas. Jeff's might be 5 miles, but if you're in New York City, it might be a mile. So what I have to decide is where I know within a 3 to 5 mile radius of my school, I have a potential market. Anything outside of that is probably, and again, depending on some schools, it can be a little farther because they're on an exit on an interstate or something. So 15 minutes might be 10 miles and people will drive 15 minutes. So, and again, some of these bigger live events will draw from a bigger radius outside of yours. That's okay. When they spin the wheel and we see their address, we're going to know whether they're going to be a potential student or not. And we just roll with it. That's why maybe 100% of the people who spin might not be in our market, but that's okay. Because if we get 200 and only 100 of them are in our market, we still got 100. Okay, we're out of time today. Did you have another question there, Dee?
No, I think that's it. That gives me kind of an idea because we were going to market out in the Roseville area, but I'm like, that's a long ways away from us. So I wasn't.
But just remember, when it comes to marketing, you said live event. If we're just talking basic marketing like direct mail and lead boxes and bandit signs, keep that in tighter around 3 mile radius.
Okay, and then this was a live event, but it's at a school that we have a school like it that's closer, and I was like, I just don't
When
know
you
if we're
say
gonna
a
get
school, you're talking elementary school?
middle school.
And
Oh, it's actually
how far away is that middle school?
So the one middle school is only about 2 miles away, but this one's probably about 5 miles away.
I would go, because you have to realize if the school's there, there'll be people that they draw from on maybe a 3-mile radius around the school that will intersect your radius. So yeah, you're still in your ballpark.
Ah,
Does that make
good
sense?
deal.
guys?
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, guys. I'll let you go. Any other questions before we hop off? Make sure you let Bob know about the live event.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Master Smith, don't if you could make me host, let me go ahead and end this. Master Summers, I just need 2 minutes of your time.
Okay. let
Master
me see
Oliver
if I
had to
can-
hop off. I take care, Rob. See you, Jeff.
I need to see your credentials. I don't know if you're qualified to be a host, so I'm gonna have to check your license.
I got it. It's in my wallet. I'll have to.
Okay, we'll see you guys.
Let me see if I can end this here. Stop.
Good answers there, Master Summers.